Alright, think about this. The United States has had 47 presidents, but most of them come from just a handful of states. Power in America has never been spread out evenly. Some states keep sending leaders to the White House, while others never have. Is it history, geography, or something deeper? An invisible pattern shaping who gets to lead? Today, we're breaking down the 8 states that have shaped the presidency more than any others. What makes these places so influential? And could this pattern still be deciding the future of American leadership? What if the next US president has already been decided, just by where they were born? But before we start, here's a little question to entertain you. Which state has produced the most US presidents? A. Massachusetts, B. New York, C. Virginia, D. Ohio. Share your answer in the comments and patiently watch this video till the end to find out the truth. And now we dive in. Number 8. Vermont. Vermont gave the US 2 presidents, Chester A. Arthur and Calvin Coolidge, who were born in the Green Mountain State. Neither was elected in a traditional way, but both left their mark on the country. Vermont has always been a rural, independent-minded state. It was one of the first states to abolish slavery and has long had a tradition of small government, local control, and strong individualism, values that both of its presidents embodied in different ways. Chester A. Arthur, a Republican, was born in Fairfield, Vermont in 1829. But here's a fun fact. He almost didn't make it to the presidency at all. When James Garfield chose him as vice president, it was mostly for political balance, not because anyone expected him to lead. Then Garfield was assassinated, and suddenly Arthur was in charge. People didn't trust him. He was known for being part of New York's corrupt political machine, and most Americans thought his presidency would be a disaster. Instead, he shocked everyone by pushing for civil service reform, making it harder for politicians to hand out government jobs to their friends. His biggest achievement, the Pendleton Act, is still the foundation of America's federal hiring system today. And if you think birther controversies started with Barack Obama, think again. Some of Arthur's critics claimed he was secretly born in Canada, which would have made him ineligible to be president. Sound familiar? There was no evidence, but the rumor persisted, much like modern political conspiracy theories. Calvin Coolidge, also a Republican, was born in Plymouth Notch, Vermont in 1872. If Arthur became president by accident, Coolidge's rise was even stranger. In 1923, President Warren G. Harding died unexpectedly, and Coolidge, his vice president, had to be sworn in immediately. But here's the twist. He was at his family home in Vermont at the time, so his own father, a notary public, swore him in by lamplight. Imagine a modern president being sworn in at their childhood home instead of Washington, D.C. Coolidge was known as Silent Cal because he barely spoke in public. But his quiet demeanor didn't mean he lacked influence. He presided over the Roaring Twenties, an era of economic growth and industrial expansion. He was a firm believer in small government and low taxes, policies that made him popular in business circles. Despite his success, he shocked the nation by choosing not to run for re-election, simply saying, "I do not choose to run." So next time someone asks which state produced the most US presidents, you might not think of Vermont first. But this little state gave America 2 leaders who rose to power unexpectedly, made lasting impacts, and left on their own terms. Not bad for a place better known for its fall foliage and Ben & Jerry's ice cream, right? And could the place you're born really determine your chances of becoming president? Let us know what you think. Let's get into it. Number 7. Texas. Texas has given America 2 presidents, Dwight D. Eisenhower and Lyndon B. Johnson. 2 men with opposite personalities but a shared ability to take charge. Eisenhower, a Republican, was born in Denison, Texas in 1890, though his family moved to Kansas when he was a baby. He became a 5-star general and the supreme Allied commander during World War II, leading the D-Day invasion that helped defeat Nazi Germany. As president, he built the U.S. interstate highway system, expanded Social Security, and led America through the early Cold War. His farewell address famously warned about the growing influence of the military-industrial complex, a phrase still used today when discussing defense spending. His leadership was steady, disciplined, and deeply respected. Americans liked Ike, and they showed it by electing him twice in landslides. Lyndon B. Johnson, a Democrat, was Texas through and through. Born in Stonewall, Texas in 1908, he was loud, relentless, and knew how to get things done. He became vice president under John F. Kennedy, and after JFK's assassination in 1963, he took over in one of America's darkest moments. Johnson wasted no time. He pushed through the Civil Rights Act of 1964, outlawing segregation, and launched his ambitious Great Society programs, which expanded Medicare, fought poverty, and reshaped education. But his presidency was overshadowed by the Vietnam War, which became increasingly unpopular, forcing him to decline running for re-election in 1968. Despite their differences, both men had a strong Texas work ethic. Eisenhower was a man of discipline and strategy, while Johnson was a master at political persuasion, known for his Johnson treatment, a personal, often intimidating style of negotiation where he would lean in close, grab a colleague by the lapels, and talk them into supporting his policies. Few could resist his pressure. Today, Texas preserves its presidential history with the Lyndon B. Johnson Ranch, which honors Johnson's legacy. Also, the Eisenhower Birthplace Historic Site recognizes Eisenhower's contributions to the nation. What does it take for a state to shape a future president? History, economy, or pure luck? Drop your guess in the comments. And now, we dive in. Number 6. Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has given America two presidents, James Buchanan and Joe Biden, separated by more than 150 years, but both leaving a mark on the nation. Buchanan, a Democrat, was born in Cove Gap, Pennsylvania in 1791. He remains one of the most controversial presidents in history, often ranked among the worst. Taking office in 1857, he faced a country on the brink of civil war but failed to take decisive action. His inaction on slavery and his support for the Dred Scott decision, which denied citizenship to African Americans, deepened national divisions. Many historians believe his failure to prevent secession directly led to the Civil War. Even in his time, Buchanan was unpopular. By the time he left office, his own party had abandoned him, and he spent his later years trying to defend his presidency, blaming others for the country's collapse. Joe Biden, also a Democrat, was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania in 1942. Unlike Buchanan, his presidency began in a deeply divided America, but under different circumstances. Taking office in 2021, he faced the COVID-19 pandemic, economic struggles, and political polarization. Biden spent decades in politics before becoming president, serving 36 years in the Senate and 8 years as vice president under Barack Obama. His presidency has focused on economic recovery, infrastructure, and global alliances, though debates over immigration, inflation, and foreign policy continue to shape his legacy. Despite their shared home state, Buchanan and Biden's presidencies couldn't be more different. One left the country in crisis, while the other took office trying to stabilize a divided nation. Today, Pennsylvania preserves its presidential history through Buchanan's Wheatland estate in Lancaster and Biden's deep ties to Scranton, a city that proudly embraces its connection to the 46th president. Some states dominate the presidency, while others never even come close. Why do you think that is? Share your theory below. And now, we jump in. Number 5. North Carolina. North Carolina gave America two presidents, James K. Polk and Andrew Johnson, both of whom played major roles in shaping the country. James K. Polk, a Democrat, was born in Pineville, North Carolina in 1795, though he later built his political career in Tennessee. Often called the Dark Horse President, he was elected in 1844 as a lesser-known candidate, but went on to have one of the most consequential presidencies of the 19th century. He expanded the United States more than almost any other president, overseeing the annexation of Texas, the Oregon Territory dispute, and the Mexican-American War, which resulted in the U.S. gaining California, Arizona, New Mexico, and more. He had a clear vision for his presidency and stuck to it, so much so that he promised to serve only one term and actually kept his word, something almost unheard of in modern politics. However, his aggressive expansionism remains controversial as it intensified the debate over slavery and led the nation closer to civil war. Andrew Johnson, also a Democrat, was born in Raleigh, North Carolina in 1808. His presidency is infamous. He took office after Abraham Lincoln's assassination in 1865 and immediately clashed with Congress over Reconstruction. Johnson opposed giving rights to formerly enslaved people and vetoed key civil rights legislation, leading to his impeachment in 1868, making him the first U.S. president to be impeached. He narrowly avoided removal from office by just one Senate vote, but his legacy remains one of failure and missed opportunities. Despite their vastly different presidencies, both Polk and Johnson left lasting marks on American history, one through territorial expansion, the other through political turmoil. Do you think geography still plays a role in who gets elected today? Tell us in the comments. And with that, let's break it down. Number 4. Massachusetts. Massachusetts has shaped American history by producing 4 presidents: John Adams, John Quincy Adams, John F. Kennedy, and George H.W. Bush, who led the nation through war, revolution, and global challenges. Massachusetts was one of the original 13 colonies, home to the Boston Tea Party and the first battles of the American Revolution. It has always been a center of education, intellectualism, and political activism, values reflected in the men it sent to the White House. John Adams, a Federalist, was born in Braintree, Massachusetts in 1735. If you've ever wondered who really set up the foundation for the presidency after George Washington, it was Adams. He was the first president to live in the White House, a staunch defender of independence, and a key figure in shaping the U.S. Constitution. But his presidency wasn't easy. He faced fierce political opposition and signed the controversial Alien and Sedition Acts, which limited free speech against the government. This cost him re-election, making him the first president to lose a race as an incumbent. His son, John Quincy Adams, a Democratic Republican, was born in 1767 and followed in his father's footsteps, becoming the only president to have a father who was also president until the Bush family came along. A brilliant diplomat, he negotiated the Treaty of Ghent, which ended the War of 1812 and helped expand U.S. territory. But his presidency in 1825 to 1829 was rocky. He lost his re-election bid to Andrew Jackson, marking the start of modern political campaigns. After leaving office, he did something no other former president had done. He returned to Congress, where he fought tirelessly against slavery until his death. Jumping ahead more than a century, John F. Kennedy, a Democrat, was born in Brookline, Massachusetts in 1917. If there's one Massachusetts president everyone knows, it's JFK. Charismatic, ambitious, and full of promise, he was a World War II hero before winning the presidency in 1960. His youth and energy captivated America, and his presidency brought major moments in history: the Cuban Missile Crisis, the launch of the Apollo space program, and the fight for civil rights. His famous line, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country," still resonates today. Tragically, his life and presidency were cut short by his assassination in 1963, an event that shocked the world and left many wondering what could have been. Finally, George H.W. Bush, a Republican, was born in Milton, Massachusetts in 1924. Though he became synonymous with Texas, his New England upbringing shaped his commitment to public service and diplomacy. As president in 1989 to 1993, he led the country through the end of the Cold War, oversaw the Gulf War, and signed the Americans with Disabilities Act. But despite his foreign policy successes, a struggling economy cost him re-election in 1992. However, his legacy endured, as his son, George W. Bush, later became the 43rd president. Today, Massachusetts takes great pride in its presidential history. The Adams National Historical Park in Quincy preserves the legacy of the country's earliest leaders. The John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum in Boston remains a major attraction, drawing visitors who want to relive the era of Camelot. Is it tradition, opportunity, or something else that keeps producing leaders from these states? Share your take. Number 3. New York. New York has produced 5 U.S. presidents: Martin Van Buren, Millard Fillmore, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Donald Trump, each leaving a distinct mark on the country. From shaping the modern presidency to navigating wars, economic crises, and political upheaval, these leaders reflect New York's long-standing influence in American politics. As one of the original 13 colonies, New York was always a center of power, wealth, and immigration. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, it had become America's financial and cultural hub, home to Wall Street, Ellis Island, and the rise of industrial tycoons. It's no surprise that several presidents emerged from this fast-paced, ambitious environment. The state's leaders have ranged from progressive reformers to business-minded politicians, reflecting New York's own evolution. Martin Van Buren, a Democrat, was born in Kinderhook, New York in 1782. He was the first president born as a U.S. citizen, since all previous presidents were born before the American Revolution. Van Buren was a political mastermind, often credited with building the modern Democratic Party. However, his presidency between 1837 to 1841 was overshadowed by the Panic of 1837, a financial crisis that sent the economy into a tailspin. He was defeated after one term, proving that economic struggles could sink even the most skilled politicians. Interestingly, Van Buren ran for president again in 1848 under the Free Soil Party, an anti-slavery movement, but failed to regain power. Millard Fillmore, a Whig, was born in Moravia, New York in 1800. Few presidents are as forgotten as Fillmore, and for good reason. He took office in 1850 after President Zachary Taylor died, but his presidency was marked by his support for the Compromise of 1850, which included the Fugitive Slave Act, a law that forced free states to return escaped enslaved people to the South. This decision made him deeply unpopular in the North and ended his political career. In a strange twist, Fillmore later ran for president again in 1856 under the anti-immigrant Know Nothing Party, but his campaign flopped and he faded into obscurity. Then came the Roosevelts, two men from the same state, even the same extended family, but vastly different in their approaches to leadership. Theodore Roosevelt, a Republican, was born in New York City in 1858. If you've ever thought of a president as larger than life, that was Teddy. He was a war hero, adventurer, and reformer who became president in 1901 after William McKinley was assassinated. He broke up monopolies, fought for conservation, and built the Panama Canal. His motto, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." Even after leaving office, he remained influential, running for president again in 1912 under the Bull Moose Party. His attempted political comeback ended in one of the wildest elections in history, where he was shot in the chest during a speech but still finished talking before seeking medical attention. Franklin D. Roosevelt, another Democrat, was born in Hyde Park, New York in 1882 and is considered one of the greatest presidents in U.S. history. He led America through the Great Depression and World War II, creating the New Deal to lift the country out of economic collapse. The only president elected 4 times, FDR reshaped the federal government, expanded social programs, and established the modern presidency as we know it. Despite suffering from polio and being unable to walk unaided, he projected strength and optimism, reassuring Americans with his famous fireside chats. His leadership during World War II turned the U.S. into a global superpower, but he died in office in 1945, just months before the war ended. And finally, there's Donald Trump, a Republican born in Queens, New York in 1946. A businessman and reality TV star before entering politics, Trump's presidency was one of the most polarizing in modern history. His policies focused on tax cuts, deregulation, conservative judicial appointments, and an America First approach to foreign policy. He became the first president in history to be impeached twice, though he was acquitted both times. After losing re-election in 2020, he remained a dominant political figure and ran again in 2024, securing a second non-consecutive term, a feat previously achieved only by Grover Cleveland. His return to the presidency has sparked intense political debate, with supporters seeing it as a correction of past policies and critics viewing it as a deeply divisive moment in American history. Today, you can visit FDR's home in Hyde Park, which showcases his leadership during the Great Depression and World War II. Theodore Roosevelt's birthplace in Manhattan preserves the legacy of his progressive reforms and conservation efforts. Van Buren's estate in Kinderhook offers insight into the early days of American politics and his role in shaping the Democratic Party. Does history repeat itself when it comes to political power? Or is it all just coincidence? Let's talk about it. And now we jump in. Number 2, Ohio. Ohio has earned its reputation as the mother of presidents, producing 7 U.S. presidents who shaped the country during some of its most turbulent times: James A. Garfield, Ulysses S. Grant, Warren G. Harding, Benjamin Harrison, Rutherford B. Hayes, William McKinley, and William Howard Taft were all born in the Buckeye State, making Ohio second in the number of presidents it has produced. But what makes Ohio such fertile ground for national leaders? In the 19th and early 20th centuries, Ohio was a political and industrial powerhouse. It was a swing state before swing states were even a thing, balancing between the growing industrial North and the rural Midwest. As America expanded westward, Ohio became a critical battleground for presidential elections, producing candidates who understood the needs of a rapidly changing nation. Many of its presidents played key roles in the Civil War, Reconstruction, and America's rise as a global power. Ulysses S. Grant, born in Point Pleasant, Ohio in 1822, was the most famous general of the Civil War before becoming president in 1869. A Republican, he led the Union Army to victory over the Confederacy, and his presidency focused on Reconstruction and civil rights for freed slaves. He pushed for the 15th Amendment, giving black men the right to vote, but his administration was plagued by corruption scandals, not involving him directly, but his close associates. Despite this, he remains one of America's most respected military leaders, and his memoirs, published shortly before his death, are still considered some of the best ever written by a U.S. president. A lesser-known fact about Grant: he was given a speeding ticket while riding a horse in Washington, D.C., the first U.S. president to ever receive one. Rutherford B. Hayes, born in Delaware, Ohio in 1822, also served as a Republican president during the Reconstruction era. His 1876 election was one of the most controversial in U.S. history, as he lost the popular vote but won the presidency through a disputed electoral process. His presidency is best known for the Compromise of 1877, which effectively ended Reconstruction by pulling federal troops out of the South. While this helped unify the nation politically, it left African Americans vulnerable to segregation and disenfranchisement, shaping race relations for decades. Another fun fact: Hayes banned alcohol from the White House, turning it into one of the driest administrations in history. James A. Garfield, born in Moreland Hills, Ohio in 1831, had one of the shortest presidencies in history. Elected in 1880 as a Republican, he served only 200 days before being assassinated in 1881. Garfield was a strong advocate for civil service reform, fighting against the corrupt patronage system where political supporters were rewarded with government jobs. Ironically, he was shot by Charles Guiteau, a disgruntled office seeker who was angry about not getting a government position. Garfield's death led directly to the passage of the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act, which changed how federal employees were hired. A bizarre detail: Garfield survived for 79 days after being shot, but his doctors used unsterilized fingers and tools to probe for the bullet, likely causing the infection that killed him. Benjamin Harrison, born in North Bend, Ohio in 1833, came from a political dynasty. His grandfather, William Henry Harrison, was also a U.S. president. As a Republican, he served from 1889 to 1893 and signed the Sherman Antitrust Act, the first federal law aimed at breaking up monopolies. His presidency also saw America's first billion-dollar budget, as the federal government dramatically increased spending. However, his failure to address economic concerns led to his defeat by Grover Cleveland in 1892. Harrison also introduced electric lights into the White House, but he and his wife were so afraid of being electrocuted that they refused to touch the light switches and made the staff handle them instead. William McKinley, born in Niles, Ohio in 1843, was another Republican president whose legacy was cut short by an assassination. Elected in 1896, McKinley led America into the 20th century, overseeing economic growth, the Spanish-American War, and the U.S. annexation of Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. He was re-elected in 1900, but in 1901, he was shot by an anarchist while attending an event in Buffalo, New York. His death brought Theodore Roosevelt into the presidency, dramatically shifting the country's political direction. An interesting detail: McKinley was a huge fan of carnations and always wore one in his lapel for good luck. The day he was shot, he had given his carnation away to a little girl just before the attack. William Howard Taft, born in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1857, was a Republican known for having a bigger impact after his presidency than during it. He served from 1909 to 1913, but struggled with progressive and conservative divisions within his party. After losing re-election, he later became Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, making him the only person in history to serve as both President and Chief Justice. He once famously said he preferred the Supreme Court over the White House, calling it the highest honor I have ever received. Another fun fact: Taft is often associated with getting stuck in the White House bathtub. Though the story is exaggerated, he did order an extra-large bathtub to be installed, capable of fitting 4 men. Warren G. Harding, born in Blooming Grove, Ohio in 1865, became president in 1921 as a Republican, but his legacy is overshadowed by scandal. His administration was filled with corruption, most notably the Teapot Dome scandal, where government officials were caught taking bribes for oil drilling rights. Harding, however, died suddenly in 1923, before the full extent of the scandal was revealed. Some speculate he was poisoned, but most historians believe he suffered a heart attack. Harding also had one of the most scandalous personal lives of any president, reportedly having multiple affairs, including a rumored child with his mistress, Nan Britton. Today, you can visit Grant's birthplace in Point Pleasant, where his early life and Civil War leadership are remembered. McKinley's Presidential Library in Canton honors his role in American expansion and economic growth. Garfield's home in Mentor showcases his legacy and tragic assassination. Harrison's home in North Bend reflects his family's deep political roots. Hayes's estate in Fremont, known as Spiegel Grove, preserves his contributions to Reconstruction. Taft's birthplace in Cincinnati highlights his dual legacy as President and Chief Justice. Harding's home in Marion stands as a reminder of his presidency and the scandals that followed. Now it's time to find out the correct answer to the quiz. Which state has produced the most U.S. presidents? A. Massachusetts, B. New York, C. Virginia, D. Ohio. And the correct answer is C. Virginia. Number 1. Virginia. Virginia produced 8 U.S. presidents, more than any other state. The list includes 4 of the nation's first 5 presidents: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe, who played a key role in shaping the foundation of the United States. Later, William Henry Harrison, Zachary Taylor, John Tyler, and Woodrow Wilson continued Virginia's influence in the White House. But what is it about Virginia that made it such a powerhouse for early American leadership? As the site of the first permanent English settlement in America, Virginia was at the heart of the country's formation. By the time the United States was born, Virginia was the largest and most politically influential state, home to key figures in the Revolutionary War, the drafting of the Constitution, and the early government. It was a center of wealth, education, and leadership, making it a natural breeding ground for presidents. But while these Virginian leaders helped build the country, their legacies are complex. Several were also slave owners, and their contributions are debated in modern discussions of American history. George Washington, born in Westmoreland County, Virginia, in 1732, was not only America's first president, but also the only one ever elected unanimously. His leadership during the Revolutionary War made him a national hero, and he set the precedent for the presidency, including the tradition of stepping down after 2 terms. Many wanted him to stay in office for life, but he refused, believing that the country needed leadership to change hands peacefully. He also warned against political parties and foreign entanglements, advice that later leaders did not always follow. Washington's influence remains so strong that his birthday is still celebrated as a national holiday. Thomas Jefferson, born in Shadwell, Virginia, in 1743, was one of the most brilliant minds in American history. As the author of the Declaration of Independence, he shaped the country's ideals of freedom and democracy. As the nation's 3rd president, he oversaw the Louisiana Purchase, doubling the size of the United States. He also sent Lewis and Clark to explore the West, setting the stage for expansion. However, despite his famous words about equality, Jefferson owned hundreds of enslaved people and fathered children with Sally Hemings, one of the people he enslaved. His home, Monticello, now serves as a historical site where both his achievements and contradictions are examined. James Madison, born in Port Conway, Virginia in 1751, is often called the father of the Constitution because of his central role in drafting the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. As the fourth president, he led the country through the War of 1812, which saw the British burn the White House. His leadership during the war was questioned, but his influence on American law and governance is undeniable. Madison was also the shortest U.S. president, standing at just 5 feet 4 inches. James Monroe, born in Westmoreland County, Virginia in 1758, is best known for the Monroe Doctrine, a policy that warned European nations to stay out of the Western Hemisphere. His presidency was known as the Era of Good Feelings, a rare period of political unity in American history. Monroe was also the last president who was a founding father, marking the end of the Revolutionary era in leadership. While these 4 Virginians shaped America's early government, the state continued to produce presidents well into the 19th and 20th centuries. William Henry Harrison, born in Charles City County, Virginia in 1773, holds the record for the shortest presidency in U.S. history. Elected in 1840, he delivered a 2-hour-long inaugural speech in freezing weather without a coat or hat. Just 32 days later, he died of pneumonia, making him the first president to die in office. His presidency was so short that his wife never even moved into the White House. John Tyler, also born in Charles City County in 1790, became president after Harrison's death, setting the precedent that vice presidents fully assume the presidency when the sitting president dies. Many of his policies were unpopular, and he was even expelled from his own party of the Whigs while in office. He later became the only U.S. president to side with the Confederacy during the Civil War, joining the Confederate government before his death in 1862. Zachary Taylor, born in Barboursville, Virginia in 1784, was a war hero before becoming the 12th president. Like Harrison, he had a short presidency, dying just 16 months into his term, reportedly after eating spoiled cherries and milk on a hot summer day. His sudden death led to speculation about poisoning, but modern tests suggest he died of natural causes, possibly cholera. Woodrow Wilson, born in Staunton, Virginia in 1856, was the last Virginian to become president and the only one to serve in the 20th century. He led the country through World War I, helped create the League of Nations, and pushed for major domestic reforms. However, he also supported racial segregation in federal offices and showed little interest in civil rights. His presidency ended in crisis when he suffered a massive stroke in 1919, leaving his wife, Edith Wilson, to secretly manage many of his duties, a situation often called the first female presidency. Virginia's presidents left behind a legacy that is both inspiring and complex. Today, you can visit Washington's Mount Vernon, where his leadership and legacy as the nation's first president are honored. Jefferson's Monticello showcases his brilliance as a writer and architect, as well as the contradictions of his legacy. Madison's Montpelier delves into his role in shaping the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Monroe's Highland reflects his contributions to early American expansion and the Monroe Doctrine. Harrison's birthplace, Berkeley Plantation, highlights his military career and brief presidency. Taylor's childhood home in Barboursville preserves the story of his rise from a general to the presidency. Tyler's Sherwood Forest Plantation stands as a reminder of his controversial presidency and later allegiance to the Confederacy. Wilson's Presidential Library in Staunton provides insight into his leadership during World War I and his push for the League of Nations. Would a future president ever come from a state that's never had one before? Or are these power states here to stay? Drop your answer below. Thank you for exploring the hidden corners of the USA with us. Don't forget to check out other hidden discoveries on our channel.